to time, it just goes away, which is really bizarre. So I'll just sign back in.
I think, I guess we'll start in a few minutes as a couple more. Oh, Viren is here. Great. Hi, Viren. We're going to start in a couple of minutes, everyone. I just want to get the COVID script up about our virtual meetings.
Do you have a snow script as well?
Yeah. Is there any accumulation yet?
It's starting.
I just got home and
that's a lot in Queens.
It was wild getting from the subway at 50th Street to my apartment on 53rd and 11th. Like windy and accumulation. It was fun.
Yeah, gonna have to start shoveling soon.
Okay, looks like I am in with the right name.
All right, I think oh, and Brett is here now. I think we have quorum, right?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, I'm gonna start then. And is that Martin?
Hi.
Hi, Martin.
Hey.
If you can, just rename yourself to identify yourself as a member. And then.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right, everyone. I'm going to get started. We have a number of attendees from the public. We have a couple of reps that I'll identify. All right. And I've got the COVID script up. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Dale Corvino. I'm the co-chair of Manhattan Community Board 4's Transportation Planning Committee. And this is our scheduled monthly meeting for December. There is our agenda is available on the website. And per the governor's orders, we're running this board meeting remotely, and it's being recorded and transcribed. And just to run down the procedure for this meeting, everyone besides the board members or the speaker and the presenter will be muted. Members of the public will be able to ask questions and make brief statements after, and ask clarifying questions after the committee has had a discussion. Just running down the rest. And then after the public has commented, we will begin our discussion and conclude with our decisions. And then we will adjourn the meeting. And then there we go. And I'm just going to run through the committee members in the interest of brevity in the order that they appear to me on the Zoom screen. We have Jeffrey LaFrancois, we have David Warren, we have Sarah Appleton, we have Viren Rambat, we have Christine Berthet, we have Brett Furfer, we have Martin Treat, we have Colin Wright. Do we have any other committee members present? Oh, and we have Rob Porter on the phone, right? Rob Walker on the phone, yes. I don't see him, but I know he's here. I don't see his name though. Okay. Did I miss anyone? Okay, so we will start with the first agenda item, and it is about the DOT's neighborhood loading zone program. And just to brief everyone, this is a general discussion that the board will have. We will have the DOT has initiated a neighborhood loading zone program, and there are a number of loading zones already in operation in Community Board 4. And these are intended to be areas where delivery vehicles and other temporary users of like a temporary space can stop and load and unload from. And they identified a number of sites in CB4 as sites of neighborhood loading zones, and we had some feedback from the 16th Street Block Association, Paul Gronke, that indicates that the loading zone on 16th Street, which I believe is near 8th Avenue, is, if that's correct,
Between
is
6 and 7.
It's right off
Oh.
of 7th.
I'm sorry, between 6th and 7th is working well, and there have been no complaints to the block association. Oh, and I should also say that among our attendees are Colleen Chattergoon from the Department of Transportation, and also I believe we had Carl Wilson from Speaker Johnson's office. I don't see any other electeds. Oh, Emily is also here. So welcome to our elected reps and to Colleen from the DOT. All right, so
I have an update on that because I don't think you have the latest letter. The latest letter we received says that they are going to install more.
yes.
Right, on the north side of West 21st Street between 8 and 7, on the south side of West 21st between 8 and 7, and the south side of West 16 between 7 and 8.
Yes.
And the other message we're getting in that letter is that from now on, they are not going to come to the community board and starting to roll out those zones as needed when there is congestion. So these are the two important information to learn.
Yeah, so that's the framework for our discussion. And I think it's obvious that we would prefer it if we were consulted on the future locations of neighborhood loading zones. So I'll open it up to the committee for discussion and any input that any of you have had regarding these loading zones, the ones that are working. And Pete Diaz is also here on the committee.
Yeah.
And Pete, if you could just rename yourself, that would be great. Do you have any comments on the neighborhood loading zone? Yes, Sarah.
Thanks. And then I think there's a couple other hands raised, at least than I can see. Yeah, so I used to live on 16th Street, actually, on that block that has one already between 6th and 7th. So I'm a big fan. I think, there's also a great use case around moving for local residents. And when you have, like, actually, if you, go to IKEA, bring some stuff home, it's so hard to actually find a space to practically do that as a resident. So I think, like, that was a really amazing use case that I and other people I know took advantage of. And I didn't see it, obviously abused in any way. So generally support the program as someone who lived on one of, a block with one of the zones. But Dale or Christine, did DOT provide any kind of rationale or framework by which they're going to follow in rolling out these additional zones if they're no longer coming for us on an ad hoc manner? Is there any rationale
Well, apparently what we are going to do is receive letters like that, maybe, maybe, to tell us, okay, that's what we did, right? Or that's what we are planning to do. And the other thing is that Inge was asking in the chat whether there is a distinction for the loading zone. And yes, there is a sign for the loading zone, which is the no parking sign. And in addition, they have designed a nice little flyer, which essentially explain how to use the loading zone. And they attach it to the pole of the parking sign, the no parking signs.
So Christine, though, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm done.
Oh, no, and just to clarify my question, like, did DOT say anything about, the rationale that they're using to pick future sites?
Well, obviously, they are going to go on location where there is, loading that is blocking the traffic.
It's like commercial loading.
Right. So this is the idea is to either commercial loading or, a large building where you have a lot of pickup from taxis or whatever, and nobody can park and there is no space for parking and it blocks the traffic. So that's going to be their priority. And I think if we want to send requests for specific one, I think they will accept them and put them in their queues.
I think the point that was raised by Inge in the chat about community awareness is kind of a good point. Aside from the fact that there would be signage, perhaps DOT can do some rollout about, hey, there's this new asset coming to your neighborhood called a neighborhood loading zone. And this is what it's all about. I see a hand raised from Jeffrey. Thank you, Sarah, for your question.
Is have they? I see Colleen also added that they're going to do it in areas where there's heavy double parking, which makes sense. Also, I guess I just want to help DOT be able to be more efficient in this regard, because this is something we beg for this type of stuff. This is a specific treatment to prevent, the clogging of blocks of traffic, of inappropriate use of the curb, and this is a reappropriation of the curb for a use we often welcome and applaud. Can we ask DOT for if there's a framework by which they will approve, so that way they don't have to come to us every time, and that if it meets that framework, boom, then good, they should do it. But if it doesn't, then there needs to be a more thorough notification or thorough process through which the agency goes through. But I would hate to have something that actually improves the use of the curb be slowed down.
Well, but they are not planning to slow down, because they are not planning to come to us.
But I'm guessing the committee's going to want to ask them to come to us.
Well,
maybe that's presumptuous of me.
I mean, we could also simply solicit recommendations from stakeholders like neighborhood block associations.
Yeah, I think if
like tonight and going forward, like, where would you like to see a neighborhood loading zone on your block? How can you help us identify a suitable location?
I mean, it seems to me that ideally they have done it. I mean, they should do it the same way they did the dining. There is a website and people can ask for it directly. And that's it. And if people want it in their streets, and then they just ask for it, because there's no reason why we need to be involved if the people think that they need a loading zone. I mean, we like loading zone. If the people, so I think it would be good if they had two systems, one where they do it as they think it's necessary, and then the public can go and ask for it.
I think that's great.
That would be my thoughts about, let's do it top, bottom, and bottom up. And we don't have to be in the middle of that. We like them. So, when people are on their block and they can figure it out. And then we would become involved only if, somebody asked for one and other people on the block are not happy about it. And then we can do on an exception basis, we can do mediation of why it's good or not good, or it's in a different place or whatever. That'd be my thought.
Do you have any further questions, Jeffrey? I'll move on. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Nope.
David, thank you, Jeffrey. David, Warren.
Yes. One is
redeem yourself.
Yes. I understand they're not going to consult with us, but will they inform us and say, okay, in a week we're doing this? I don't know what their turnaround time is, and I guess
getting letters.
People are trying to figure out what the criteria will be that they want for a load, that DOT is going to decide to put in a loading dock, and then they'll inform us, on this such and such block and space we're putting in loading zone.
So that's what they are doing right now. That's
right.
The dot.
But they're informing us. So how much advance notice I'm not talking about consultant, but how much time do they give us before they inform? Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? They're saying, hey, just want to give you the heads up. We're doing this.
It looks like it's going to be 1 week or just simultaneously. So what we can do with those letters is we can take that and put it in information in the blast to the community, and say, okay, these loading zones are being installed, boom.
And at least we should also let the police stations.
That's not our business, the police station. The DOT.
Well, it is because they can.
No, the DOT take care of that. That's not us to do the work of everybody else.
They have that channel, David.
Okay, great. All right, so we're in good shape. This is good news.
Okay, thank you, David. I'm going to move on to Colin.
Yeah, I guess by this point, my questions have pretty thoroughly been answered. I was curious about, similar to Jeffrey's comment about the framework, and also David's question about how members of the public or members of these streets can request a loading zone. So I guess I'll just put a statement in support, echoing Christine, all in favor of, streamlining the process for these types of improvements without, in whatever way we can. I'd like to see more of these. To the first comment, I definitely have moved several times in New York City and absolutely would have really appreciated a loading zone on my block. So I'd like to see more of those in CB4.
Great, thanks, Colin. Brian Weber, who's our public member, is asking about the definition of a neighborhood loading zone. Janine, is that flyer that that DOT produced explaining, is that in the Dropbox? Do we have that flyer?
I posted it in the Dropbox, but only the committee members, but I can send it around to the board.
Let's have.
Yeah, or maybe, sorry?
Can you bring Colleen over? Colleen?
Yeah, she's over. She's just muted.
Colleen, hi, Colleen. Perhaps you can take a moment to explain.
Hi everyone. It's Colleen from DOT. I was just responding to that.
Okay.
So neighborhood loading zones are dedicated curb space for short-term loading activities such as package deliveries by commercial vehicles, active loading and unloading of personal vehicles, and taxi and car service pickup and drop off. That's what the neighborhood loading zone services provide. So it's if you have your vehicle and you went to the grocery store and you want to unload your groceries, you can pull up in that spot and do so without having the fear of you'll be ticketed.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. And I mean, we talked about the fact that there was a DOT flyer explaining the so that people can easily identify the NLZ. Can we also do some, I think it would be a good idea for us as the board to do some outreach on their specific locations within our district. Like, there is now a neighborhood loading zone on this street, and here's how it works.
We should include that in Janine in the blast. Whenever you get a notification, we should include that.
Okay, yeah, I can do an email blast.
Email blast.
The blast, and possibly also the kiosk content that we generate.
That would be good. Yeah.
Are there any more comments from the committee?
So I think if we want to have both ways, we need to maybe make a resolution to ask that also there would be a channel for the public to ask for it.
Yeah, a channel for the public to ask for it, and that we'd like to take steps to educate and inform our community about their location. So as soon as we can be provided with information about the locations and the terms by which people can use them in a concise way, we can distribute that information.
Is there a time limit how long a car can unload for? Oh, 30 minutes.
I think it's 30 minutes. Yeah, Colleen confirmed it's 30 minutes.
Okay.
All right, do we have any hands raised from the public? I see hands raised, but I'm not sure if it's about this. I see Pamela's hand is raised. Have you brought them over, Janine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Pamela Wolf, did you want to comment specifically on loading zones, neighborhood loading?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I unmuted myself, and you can obviously hear me. I don't know if you can see me or not.
We can't see you, but we can hear you clearly.
I don't think it matters. You all know what I look like anyway. Yeah, so this was really interesting. I responded to the notification that we were going to have these loading zones on 21st Street between 7th and 8th Avenues. That's my block where I lived most of my life, and I'm very familiar with how it works. I'm in mid-block at 223 West 21st, and there is a fire hydrant in front of my building, which has been the de facto loading zone for taxis, for all of the things that Christine mentioned. And particularly the UPS truck or trucks, which park there more or less permanently during the daytime and then distribute with the hand trucks up and down the block. I don't have any particular objection to that. I suspect that that use will continue, even though there will be loading zones elsewhere on the block. I see that one of them is to be in front of 201, which is the Piermont at the east end of my block. That's at 7th Avenue. And that makes a lot of sense. However, I would point out that there is a fire hydrant in front of that building. Just, I understand that the loading zones take up 40 linear feet of curb, and I think that overlaps the hydrant. That's not an issue as far as I'm concerned. It's never been an issue in front of my building either. But I see that the other site that's been set aside is in front of 234 West 21st Street, which is mid-block. It's the tall building, the 7-story building on my block. And my question about that is, has DOT really considered the fact that that's a bike lane? There will be parking permanently during the daytime in the bike lane, forcing all those bicyclists to get out in the middle of the street in order to get by. I don't think that's a good idea at all. I've seen too many situations with bikes where they've been forced by double parkers on the south side of the street into the traffic, and it is one dangerous situation. I would like for the lady from DOT who's in this meeting to take that into account. I would propose a much better location for the second loading zone on the block to be on the north side of the block at the west end, the 8th Avenue end. There is presently a very old pre-city bike bicycle installation there. I think it takes about 10 bikes, maybe, that just for private bikers. It was an amenity that was installed before there was a city bike. That spot in front of Raoul, the business that's there, I think would be a perfectly logical place to have the second loading zone on the block. All of that having been said, my block association, and I'm representing that group to this evening, is having a fascinating dialogue between residents of 22nd Street. Some are enthusiastically in favor of getting a loading zone on 22nd Street, although none have been proposed. And the other faction is very strongly opposed to any on that block for various, also very good reasons. So I don't know whether an application to DOT by a private citizen for that block is going to cause a massive brouhaha in the community. I don't know how that can be handled. Christine may have wonderful ideas about how that should work. I will say that I put this notice out to the Block Association membership, asking for responses, a survey, asking for responses to the ones that were presented to 21st Street, and not one single member out of my 80 or 90 members responded. So I have to assume that people are really happy with the concept. That's all I've got to say, and thank you very much for your opportunity to speak.
We'll move on to the next member of the public in just a moment. Colleen, to the point about bike lanes, is there a policy or procedures in place to prevent any conflict with loading zones and bike lanes?
I'm sure we reviewed it and there's no conflict with that. Is it a protected bike lane?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm positive we reviewed it and there would not be a conflict, just so you know.
Okay, I don't understand that, Colleen. Can you explain more how a loading zone in the middle of a block, in the middle of a bike lane, which is a painted on official, it's been there for a few years, it is used, it's very popular. It's a
I don't think
westbound street. And I'm just confused about how that could not be a conflict.
Pam, is there a parking protected bike lane?
I'm sorry?
It's
Is it a
7 o'clock.
Is it a parking protected bike lane?
I don't know what that means.
No, it's just paved.
What
Say
is the
again?
location?
Christine, I didn't hear you. Someone else was speaking.
Yeah, it's a bike lane which is protected.
It's probably a parking protected bike lane, Christine, because we've installed quite a few of that in CB4. Can you tell me what's the
Yeah.
location?
234 West 21st Street.
I'm sorry, but it's not protected.
No.
It's not a protected
Okay,
bike
no,
lane.
it's not, yeah.
So Colleen, I mean, maybe we should have a note saying we are concerned about that location because of the bike lane.
It is an official bike lane, though. It's mapped
No, we
and
understand.
painted.
No, we know, but it's not parking protected. It's
I get you. I didn't understand the meaning of that.
Parking
phrase, but-
protected is a lane of
Yeah, got it.
designated parking spaces with a barrier.
No, there's not
zone.
room on the block for that.
Okay. All right. Well, we've made note of the location. Colleen's going to look into it. We're going to make a note of it. I'm
I'd
gonna
be
move on to-
grateful. if
Thank
that-
you. I'm going to move on
and
to
I'm
the
sorry,
next.
just tell me the location again.
234 West 21st Street. It's the south side of the block. It's a tall building, well, tall for our block. It's 7 stories.
Yeah, I think the address is good enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great,
I'm going to
thank
move
you.
on to the next member of the public is Susan.
Uh,
Susan, are you with us?
Hi all. Yeah, I'm here. How's everyone tonight? I'm very interested in the loading zones. I do all of the newsletters, and I don't know if all of you see them for the West 400 Block Association. I have not heard anything about this other than what was on the docket for tonight, and we're very interested in it. My question is, which piggybacks on Christine's, is how do we get that information out into the community to get some good responses that are workable, and so that everyone feels that they've had some stake into the process.
Yeah.
You know, like we have so many members on our newsletter. That doesn't mean that it's every single member or resident of that community. And so even if we can say, do we have everyone's email? How do we reach out so that we don't have issue? Because it's so much nicer to have positive change and everybody.
Susan, if you have a newsletter, you know, you can take the 2 documents from DOT and send them out to your group and say, okay, this is what's happening. It's good news, you know.
No, it's great. But I again, never received any of that.
No,
the West
because
400.
the reason to come to this meeting is you didn't receive any of that.
Okay. Now I just.
The documents are available. Those documents are available, correct, Janine?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can make public, yeah.
That would be great, because I didn't see them. I did scan through. I really try to be
Well,
very.
it was in the Dropbox. But,
Okay.
So
Okay.
we'll do that.
My other question is on the 30 minutes, how will we know how long someone's been parked there, whether it's been 30 minutes or not?
You don't.
So
Somebody's
it's become a
sitting-
parking spot again.
Well, no.
I mean, the zones, I believe the zones are going to be subject to enforcement on the basis of the permitted
Dale?
use.
Dale, can I respond to that?
And it's Colleen, they're going to be subject to enforcements. For example, let's say a traffic enforcement agent passes by and that vehicle has been sitting there and it's been more than 30 minutes and he passed by again and he sees the same vehicle there, he can issue a summons to that vehicle.
Okay,
Yeah,
so will he be marking tires then?
I wouldn't say he will be marking tires, he'll be marking license plates.
Okay, I think Sarah has an answer.
Yeah, sorry, just again, personal experience as a block resident. I did once get a summons, actually incorrectly, by the NYPD for being in the loading zone. I'd only been there 10 minutes while moving. But so yes, long story short, the NYPD is watching.
Enforcement is in effect. Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to move on to, thank you for your questions. I'm going to move on to Melody.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. I have a couple of questions, I think, for Colleen. One is, moving in and out usually takes more than 30 minutes. Is there a way to get dispensation? Is there any way to work around that? I guess that was my first question. And I can't think of my second one, but this would be good to know. And, my second question is,
yeah.
Go ahead, Colleen.
So with moving in and out, this is something you would have to coordinate with your building management to put up signs. The neighborhood loading zone really is not intended for move in and move outs. It's for vehicles to make the quick pickup and drop off, and it's for taxis to pull up into the space. If you're moving in and out, again, that's something you would have to coordinate with your building management.
And how do I coordinate that with what's going on in the street? Because I'm living in my building. I am my building management.
My understanding is that there is a procedure, and Colleen, tell me if I'm wrong, is that there is a procedure to ask for a special permit, and maybe it's with NYPD, where you can ask.
It's not asking for a special permit. You can work with the local precinct, and you can let them know that you have a specific movement that's happening at a given day and a given time, and they can give you signage, NYPD signage, and you can post that up there in front of your building.
Okay,
I believe that is very helpful information to
in front of the building.
Many people at this meeting, because I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Melody. I'm going to move on to our next.
I think she had another question.
I think she had another question. Yeah.
It's been answered. It's been answered. Thank you.
It's been answered. Okay.
That was two
and
questions.
Melody, I'm more than happy to help you when you have issues with that. Feel free to email me if you need any help. I'll put my email in the chat.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Leslie.
Leslie, you're on mute.
I can't see the full name because
I didn't mean to raise my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any more questions from the public on the topic of NLZs, neighborhood loading zones?
Do we need a letter?
So, I mean, this is
we
what
talked about a letter.
These are the notes I have. 234 is an issue. We'd like to have notification so that we can, educate the public. And 3, it would be good to have a channel to go directly from the block association or to DOT in addition, so that they can request it. Right?
And we'd like to undertake public awareness, a public awareness campaign about the NLZs as they come online.
Right.
Well, can I ask a question?
Okay.
Sorry, I should have asked earlier on. What about the blocks which have police precincts? And more often than not, people get into sort of tussle with the cops even when they pull their sort of cabs up.
Well, it's kind of a different issue. It's like whether they want to request a loading zone or not. That's all.
Oh, okay. So they could request potentially.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the obstacles are going to be more pronounced.
Yeah.
But based on our experience and our interactions, but
so do we have a motion somewhere?
I would bundle your notes into a motion for a letter to DOT regarding the NLZs.
Okay.
I second that.
All in favor of such a letter?
Okay.
Aye. Any opposed or present not eligible?
If you are voting and you don't have, we can't see you, you may want to vote into the chat, right?
You can vote into the chat, or also there is a vote sheet, right, Janine?
No,
or we're filling that out. Oh, we do need your vote.
Right.
So just please make sure committee members.
Is there?
Colin voted aye. Please make sure that Christine is aware of your vote if you're not visible, voting visibly.
And maybe Dale, we can ask if people are opposed instead of in favor.
Yeah.
Okay. Is Rob Walker on?
Rob Walker?
Have you voted?
I don't see him.
Okay.
He's not on right now.
No, he was
And
earlier,
Pete,
but okay.
Pete, what was your vote? Yes.
Pete is a yes.
Yes, you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, we're going to move on to the second agenda item, which is, I believe Sarah is leading this up, scaffolding research. And I would just like to preface this discussion by saying that I reached out to both Hudson Yards, Hell's Kitchen Alliance, the Neighborhood Bid, and also some of the people who are in charge of some of the large construction sites in and around Hudson Yards in the West 30s, to ask them to maintain free, clear, and safe passages when there are construction sheds, construction enclosures, and sidewalk sheds. Because what I was experiencing on the regular, like on a daily basis, was unmasked construction workers from the job sites hanging out in what is essentially a constrained passageway, because it's, you know, just barely 6 feet, and talking to each other across the passageway, or smoking and coughing into the passageway. And I implored the developers and their contractors and their contractor spokesman to please get the word out that, you know, the laborers, the contractors, and the workforce should be taking their breaks in designated areas where the public doesn't have to run this gauntlet underneath the scaffolding with a constrained passageway. So that's my 2 cents on this. And now turn it over to Sarah, who's done some research on this topic, which I'm sure we're going to find fascinating.
I'm sure, totally. Thanks, Dale. So basically, I just wanted to raise this as a potential new item of business for discussion in the whole group. I started this discussion with Christine and Dale earlier this year, and the images here I'm sure will be familiar to everyone. These were just, I took, you know, in a walk just a couple block radius from my apartment in Chelsea, and there were like dozens more I could have included here. But basically, it just seems like, you know, over the past decade, maybe even more, there's been a real proliferation, I feel, in the amount of scaffolding that's on our street. And yeah, Jenny, if you flip to the next page, I'd love to just kind of orient folks around some facts. Wow. So what you see on the left side of the screen is actually some Department of Buildings data. They have a visualization now on the city's open data portal. And essentially, as of today, throughout the whole city, there are nearly 10,000 active sheds. And so that's a distance of actually about 400 miles. So literally you could string them up between here and Richmond, Virginia. They are mostly in Manhattan. And the number of issued permits for the sheds has increased more than a third in just the past 2 years. The average time that each is in place is about 365 days. And, you know, of course, that's an average. So, you know, there are some worst offenders who have maintained scaffolding for over 10 years continuously. In our district specifically, which is what the image on the left is focused on, there are apparently, according to DOB, 415 active sheds, as scaffolding is also known. The average time in place is almost a year, getting there, 311 days. And it looks like there are 57 sheds that have been in place for over 1 year. The longest continuous shed, according to their data, looks like it's at 335 West 39th Street for over 4,000 days. Looks like the first permit for that was issued back in 2009. So point being, I personally feel that there's an issue here, that the number of these sheds has increased. There are big quality of life implications for folks who live or work on streets with lots of scaffolding. It's also actually an economic issue. You know, prohibits folks from accessing businesses, makes it less desirable, decreases foot traffic in some instances. But I also think it's, you know, a real transportation issue, as Dale, you know, frankly raised already. And so, you know, does fall under the purview of this committee. And is something that we, you know, could engage on if we so desired as a group. So basically, in doing some research, and I chatted also with a member of Ben Kellis's office who's, you know, done a lot of legislative work around this issue. Jenny, if you hop to the next page, you know, about 2/3 of the number of sidewalk sheds or scaffolding seems to be driven by kind of typical construction and maintenance. And then about 1/3 of it, you know, seems to be associated with local law 11 actions. And I just threw up this page here, just threw it together quickly for folks who aren't familiar with this law. But essentially, the intent of the law is to mandate facade inspections to ensure pedestrian safety. And it originated as a response to a fatal brick accident back, in 1979. And the current iteration requires all buildings that have more than 6 stories to have their facades inspected every 5 years. And if the inspection then identifies issues with the facade of a building, the owners have to maintain scaffolding to protect pedestrians while the problems are addressed. And the Department of Buildings is kind of the main city actor here. So they approve the shed permits, conduct initial facade inspections, and then have to re-inspect after any required work is done. From initial conversations I've had, a lot of folks point to Local Law 11 as an inadvertent driver of the scaffolding proliferation. So some of the challenges I've heard are listed on the right. Local Law 11 doesn't require the work to be completed in any specific time frame, nor does the Department of Buildings right now. The law also kind of mandates the same approach and requirements for owners, regardless of kind of the severity of the issue with the facade that's identified. I've heard that the Department of Buildings, doesn't feel that they have sufficient resources to actually inspect all sites in a timely manner, which can lead to scaffolding, staying up for months longer, even after work is completed. DOB doesn't actually scrutinize whether active work is underway when they're reviewing shed permit applications. And then also some landlords have been known to keep scaffolding up indefinitely as the financial incentives aren't actually aligned. So actually keeping up scaffolding can be cheaper than doing the work, or actually even dismantling it. So there are a couple potential improvements that have been proposed. Janine, if you just hop to the next slide. So Ben Kalis's office has been driving this. There's been a lot of bills proposed in the City Council. One around mandating completion of any required repairs within 90 days, imposing penalties if there's no active work done on a scaffolding site within a 7-day period, requiring DOB to inspect sheds that have been up for more than 1 year every 6 months at the owner's expense, giving more flexibility for different approaches, depending on the severity of the issue with the facade. And then one also around actually enabling DOP to use drones to conduct some of these inspections where there's been a bottleneck. And then I've also heard, that a potential, avenue could also be that DOB actually has the ability to do its own rule changes to, for instance, require work to be done within a certain number of days or impose a penalty, but that because they are resource constrained, that is why I've heard they seem to have been reluctant to do that. So point being, I just want to kind of throw this fact base out there for the group, raise it as an issue, and would love to, hear if this resonates with folks, if there's interest in engaging on this issue. Because Janine, if you hop back to page 2 for a second, I, for instance, would love to chat with DOB about, for instance, when we see kind of 57 sheds in place over a year, how are they, actually exerting oversight? What are they doing to actually ensure that these sheds are up for an appropriate purpose? I'd love to start that conversation with them, for instance, but I will pause there and see if anyone has any reactions.
That's amazing. Thank you, Sarah. This is far worse than I ever imagined.
Really? You must not live in my neighborhood. I feel like there's scaffolding on every single block.
Well, I think what's astounding is to see it mapped and to see it quantified and to see it, to talk about the durations. Just for everyone's general understanding, very often building owners or operators will refer to this Local Law 11 cure as repointing the bricks, which is very often the bulk of the work. So when you hear people talking about that, that's usually a legal obligation of brick buildings over 6 stories. So let me go to, wow, that's great though. Thank you for doing this work. And I do think it's definitely a departure point for a conversation. I'm looking at hands up. I see Colin's hand is up.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you, Sarah, so much for this really great research. I love the statistic that you could put these scaffolding one-on-one to Virginia or whatever it was. That's a really key piece of information, I think. Obviously there are so many quality of life implications with scaffolding in New York, and there has been for a long, long time. And I can't imagine that anybody really likes the status quo that we have going on right now, except perhaps scaffolding builders. But your specific question was, does this resonate? And yes, it does resonate. Also, I think that it can't be overlooked that this is, as you said, I mean, it is an economic, small business issue here. Just anecdotally, I used to get my hair cut on 22nd and 9th Avenue, Prime Barber. And, I would talk to my barber who owned the store, every time I went in, and every time after the scaffolding went up, he started, his business just plummeted because he's new. Nobody knew he was there. Barbers like him rely on foot traffic. Anyone who at least pre-COVID, gets a storefront in Manhattan is relying on foot traffic, and scaffolding is really detrimental to people seeing and walking in and engaging with your business. So I would love to see this issue wrapped up into some of the save our storefront conversations that are happening right now. I know that, some of our local elected officials are really leading the charge on that. And I just really like to add, that sort of anecdote about foot traffic in New York City and how important, being able, this could be a economic sort of recovery measure tackling this, and maybe a small one, but I think a really significant one for a lot of businesses in the neighborhood.
Totally.
Thanks, Colin. That's a good point about the economic impacts. Brett.
Yeah, thanks. This actually kind of reminds me of the joke about New York City that it'll be a nice place when they're done building it. The scaffolding issue, it's one of those really hard things to deal with. I will point out one benefit to them. When it's raining or snowing, you can take shelter under them on the sidewalk. There's a lot of our homeless residents have also discovered. But yeah, and a lot of it is, I think you're hitting it on the head about the economic driver, why they stay in place for so long. I remember when I first moved into the neighborhood back in 2000, and there was a scaffolding on the 9th Avenue side of the post office before they were starting the Moynihan renovations, and people in the neighborhood were like, "Oh, that's been up as far as anybody can remember that scaffolding," and if not for the fact that they were doing the Moynihan renovations, I think our concern was that the Landmarks Commission was going to come and designate that the scaffolding is historically significant. But they did take it down to do the renovation. But the story I got about why they left it up was apparently, Amtrak and Port Authority and were arguing who's responsible, the renovations, and the cost of taking it down apparently had been more cost prohibitive from an annual budgeting standpoint than it would have been to just actually hire somebody to take it down, because they were working on their budgets annually rather than the lifetime cost of renting this thing year to year. So I don't know if the ideas that you're proposing. I mean, if someone owns a building and they're having a renovation that's taking a long time, because it really oftentimes is the city's fault, from what we from the stories I hear from landlords. I get their side of the story is waiting for the inspection, delayed by the city. The permitting process takes so long. It's just the bureaucracy is what forces a lot of the landlords to keep their scaffolding up, because their construction, they don't want to have to keep building it, taking it down, building it, taking it every time they have a next step. And that of course has ripple effects on other things. I see, we see sidewalk maintenance as the next agenda item. There's a dent in a sidewalk on the northwest corner on 8th Avenue and 29th Street. For a while that had never been fixed. For a while there was scaffolding up there. They finally took the scaffolding down there a couple months ago, that sidewalk has been dented longer than I've been in the neighborhood. So it's all of these things. It's about enforcement. It's about who's responsible. A lot of finger pointing. I think we're identifying this as an issue. The pressure is really on our elected officials, I think, to enact the right changes. I think you're starting the conversation and a lot of things that our community board can advocate for. But it's our electeds have to actually push through some of these initiatives, study what are the causes and effects that make these scaffoldings go up. But the last thing I just want to point out is, even though we do, note that this is coming from an incident that took place in the 1970s, there are real safety issues. I know there was this, I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago in the Upper West Side, a hotel, a woman sitting on a bench with her granddaughter, and a brick fell off the hotel and killed the granddaughter sitting on her lap. I mean, so the tragedies still happen while the bricks are not properly inspected and replaced. So I don't know if the solution is to get rid of the scaffolding altogether. It's tough, but it is going to be making sure the scaffolding is only up when it's necessary, and figuring out how to fast track all the things that are causing the scaffolding to be up longer than they need to be. Hopefully they're not like about, the post office can't afford to take the scaffolding down in their annual budget. Those are the wrong reasons to keep the scaffolding up. And but I think it's, thank you for bringing this up as something that we need to be making a record of our opinion on this.
Thanks, Brett. David.
Yes, Sarah, thank you very much for bringing this up. This has been a pet peeve of mine for years. This, and also when they block off the street and do construction for a long time. My building has had a scaffolding in front of it for about 7 years with hardly any work done. What I would suggest is twofold. One is to maybe create an ad hoc committee where we would work with other community boards also on the laws and the problems. The other thing is, and this is, I don't know, this is kind of a gray area because it's kind of political. We have an election of a mayor, Manhattan Borough president, and the council is to find out, now that they're campaigning, what they're going to do to implement the law within the city council and then being signed by the next mayor. So, so my suggestion, if you wanted, Sarah, start an ad hoc committee with a bunch of the community boards, I think that would be the most effective way to get this stuff done. Once again, thank you, because you did the research. I mean, I know it just knowing it, but you actually put the facts to what we know, which is great. So let me know if you want me to help you with an ad hoc committee or any way I can. Thank you again.
Thanks, David. Christine?
Yeah, Sarah, this is fantastic. This is really, really good and very depressing. I'm supporting everything you said. I mean, my reaction, I have had some discussion with the building owners, and I'm going to sound pretty rough here, but on the street, we have had, in 10 years, we have had about 2,000 people killed, and killed by bricks falling is maybe 1 or 2. And when I put those things in perspective, I really don't see why we need such an extreme regimen of inspection. Every 5 years is pretty incredible. And I think if we were going to push it to every 7.5 years or every 10 years, the benefit to all of us would be enormous. The DOT, the Department of Building would be less stressed. And, what is the risk of pushing it to 10 years? And I think it should be tried, because in parallel, we have 2,000 people killed, 200 people killed every year. And, there's no cars on scaffold as far as I'm concerned, as can I see. So I think it's disproportionate. I mean, we don't want to lose anyone, right? But the treatments of those two things are disproportionate. And it feels to me that we could loosen that. I mean, it seems that we had a knee-jerk reaction. One person was killed 10 or 20 years ago, and now the whole city has to go in a frenzy. And I think it's overreacting, and we need to do something different. The second thing is that maybe for new construction, we should recommend that those new buildings have a technology that does not require a scaffolding on the sidewalk. So they could have on the first floor, on the top of the first floor, something that you suspend there, and it doesn't have to have feet on the sidewalk. So every new building, just like people can, so there must be a technology which allows you to do that, just like they have a technology that allows to do cleaning from the roof. And I think there should be a technology that allows you to do the inspection from the, and does not require, give a shed to the pedestrian, but doesn't require to have feet coming in the street. Another thought could be that we require that the scaffolding is installed on the other side of the curb in the street, and that there is protection so that there is no parking wherever there is a scaffolding. So instead of the burden being on the pedestrian, the burden would be on the parking. So we could have, jersey barriers or whatever along that installation, and it would be installed with feet in the feet of the scaffolding would be in the parking lane. And now we would have all these lines of parking that cannot park. And I can tell you that very quickly people would insist that this be resolved, because it's not the pedestrian, it would be the cars and the parking and the loading. So I think that's maybe another idea. And then finally, I think the small ID business is great. Yes, it is a major problem. And I think there should be a price escalation to make it very, very expensive to keep it up. So there should be a price which says after, if you have it more than 3 months, then here you go, you pay. So these are all the thoughts, brainstorming here.
Great. Yeah, and Martin in the chat mentioned that the scaffolding as it exists constrains passageway for ADA.
Yeah, ADA, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go on to Jeffrey.
Thank you for this, Sarah. I think it's fantastic. I think we could find an alignment here of pedestrians in business, which is voters of all stripes. It's actually, it casts a wide net. It's not just about business, though I have to say, from a business perspective, this can close, scaffolding can literally close businesses. So Christine, I'm all for an extension of the time. I wonder what the opposition will look like to that, what the bombast around it will be when we say, and make it longer. It's actually really safe already. I imagine.
Work.
Yeah. So was the thought this evening to come up with some recommendations tonight, or just to begin a framework? Okay.
Right.
Okay, thanks. But I think we could find a great alliance of business interest and pedestrian safety and not just pedestrian safety, but public space on this in a big way.
And I would also say that to Christine's point about the duration, it's possible that in the beginning, there was such a backlog of potentially unsafe facades because the work hadn't been done on a regular basis, that they just wanted to say everyone needs to get this inspection within 5 years to make it safer. But now we have this regime, this protocol that's been in place for decades, and these facades have been inspected on a every 5 year basis. So we can attest to the success of the program and say these facades are generally safer than they were when the program started. And to the points that are made about, political interest that I think Brett and both Jeffrey made, is that, whatever recommendations we come up with, it makes sense to address to the current Manhattan Borough President, Mayor, DOB, and and our other electeds. I'm going to Viren.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you. It's a very well-known problem. As an architect, I know a lot more about it, unfortunately. And I think, so there are a couple of things I'm going to sort of mention. Everything else that's been said is absolutely valid. The issue is that of enforcement, number one. Someone has to go check, and that's not happening. DOB is overburdened, and the inspectors don't actually keep going. They're not actually required to go and knock on every door. But there are certain mechanisms in place. For example, permits need to be pulled every 2 years. So you could restrict the life of a permit depending on the task associated with that scaffolding. So we can make those kind of constructive recommendations. To get rid of scaffolding is going to be much harder because it actually does ensure pedestrian safety, and we need that. Design is another sort of criteria. The AIA, which is the sort of American Institute of Architects, they actually did a competition a couple of years ago actually, inviting proposals from students and professionals to come up with ideas about making our scaffolding look better and nicer and actually more efficient. And there's some that have actually been adopted by the city. The other thing that I would like to mention, and that also can go into sort of set of recommendations that if we decide to come up with those, and that is when a building owner or a developer or whoever applies for the permit, he's not required to provide a plan. It's basically leased from scaffolding companies, and they come and they prepare whatever needs to be done. So in one of your examples you showed, you have multiple columns, and there are columns right in the middle of a sidewalk.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, very often you don't need them, but it makes it cheaper for the guys to actually have smaller columns coming down and stuff like that. So those things need to be sort of addressed by the DOB. So if I go for a permit, I should be required to submit a plan as to how it's going to be installed on the sidewalk. So I think it's a big point, and DOB is aware of it. A lot of city agencies are aware of it, but it's not been taken up in the manner in which it should be taken up. So I think it's worth bringing these issues up, and then somehow sort of making noise is important. That's what I think. If we don't make noise, people are not going to pay attention to this.
Totally. Thanks. That's a great point. I did not know that about the differences in design, or rather, had not thought that through in the detail and the potential opportunities there for even regulating design potentially.
And I have a question, Björn, about that. It's like I was wondering about that. You know how it is until you put an issue on the map. Now I'm walking around looking at all the the scaffold. So some scaffold follow the design that were approved 2 years ago. Is there a requirement for all the scaffold to be like that or not?
Not yet, not yet. As far as I know, not yet. And you're right. I mean, there are other sort of issues also. The scaffolding that turns the corner, they're much more problematic, especially when they're not planned properly and the columns come in the way. So going back to Martin's point, the turning radius is never maintained, for example.
Right. Right. So they don't have to use the new design. They just use the old design, and then they put it anywhere. I mean, you know, in front of my building at a point of time, they were going to close our entrance to the building. That was the design.
Right.
I said, no, don't do that.
The designs are actually left to people to choose from. So depending on the company you choose, you get what you get.
And is there a duration? So this is, they give you a permit for what? For the default permit is for how long?
Depending on the type of work, but by and large, it's, you know, couple of years, 2 years. If it's a much longer duration project, like a new building, then you get much, but you're still required to renew certain permits every 2 years. Again, depending on.
And that's another thing we could do, is ask that the thing was be given for 1 year.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
And then make the renewal very expensive.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying, that depending on the type of work, so if it is facade work, and if somebody's just using this as an excuse to have this free structure in front of their building so that they don't have to do the repairs, then you give them 90 days or 6 months or 1 year time frame within which they have to do it. You can't force people to complete work in a particular amount of time, but you can charge them if they don't. Meaning, if they go back for the permit.
Right. That's fascinating.
Thanks, Viren, for that perspective. I don't see any yet. Jeffrey, did you want to?
Just real quick, if anybody hasn't watched it or has, I strongly encourage it. It's on HBO. It's a show called How To with John Wilson. He does an entire show dedicated to scaffolding in New York City and the scaffolding industry, including an annual conference that he visited in New Orleans. And the industry is a racket. So based on local law 11. So it is worth the watch. It's quite comical and very educational as well.
Wait, Jeffrey, what was the full name of that? How To with
It's called How To with John Wilson. You'll
Wilson.
probably watch more than just the scaffolding episode. Also, it's it's a really funny, dry show. It's on HBO.
Jeffrey, if you're able to pull up the link, put it in the chat for everyone.
I'll find it. Absolutely.
Huge surprise there that the scaffolding industry.
I just put a link from NYT article that's worth reading too. Our lives under construction.
Thanks, Viren.
Yes, I saw that one. That's a good article.
Okay, do we have attendees? Do we have public questions or comments on the scaffolding issue?
We do.
There's 2 people.
1, 2, 3, 4. Boom.
Carrie? Carrie, do you have a comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So I'm thrilled that, Sarah, that you brought up this topic, because in the past few years, we've had 5 scaffoldings up on my block with various construction projects. One of them, they were in between management. I had to get MCB4 involved and Corey Johnson's office involved because it was up for years. My building just completed local law last week. I find it to be, kind of dangerous. Obviously you have a lot of kind of people smoking weed, homeless, doing pull-ups, using it as a gym. So I think it's a huge, huge problem. There's no incentive. As we finished local law last week, I then reached out to our engineer and our contractor. And I'm like, okay, the next step is to remove the scaffolding. How long is that going to take? And I got an answer from our engineer. Just, the process with the Department of Buildings is pretty ambiguous. You're kind of at their mercy, and then they have to prepare the FISP report, and then some DOB inspector shows up unannounced. Bottom line is we are at the mercy of them, of the DOB, to come and tell us when they come down. It could be anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 weeks. We're done with the work. And
Sorry, can I ask you a question? Since you just did the work, how long did the actual work take?
The actual work, once they started, obviously we got shut down because of coronavirus.
Okay.
But the actual work itself of the local law for our building took about 4 months. We did have a delay because we needed access for the building next door to us, and we were waiting on an access agreement from them. So that put a little, snafu in the whole thing. But from start to finish, they were very good contractors, and it took about 4 months. We're a 6-story building with the front facade it's pre-war, front, the side, the back courtyards, but they were pretty good. but we did have.
4 months is not an unreasonable time, but then you're saying it's at least another month or possibly 2 months to have the scaffolding removed once the work is done because of DOB.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
That's really helpful. I really appreciate you, with your recent experience or ongoing experience of the process, bringing it to the committee.
Yeah. But I will say, I mean, I think it is, you know, for all the reasons that Amy had mentioned, it's troublesome. I think that it, you know, I can't wait to get it down because now we had 5 scaffoldings up simultaneously on our block. I've come to find out through Lori at Corey Johnson's office that, you know, there are some buildings in Hell's Kitchen area and some blocks that have had up their scaffolding for 8 years. So I just think that this is unconscionable to you know, have this eyesore and this kind of, you know, safety issue, like you said, going underneath there with construction workers who are not covering their masks and, you know, on a daily basis. I just think there's got to be something done. And one of the buildings on my block, I did find out that it was cheaper for them to keep up the scaffolding on a monthly basis as opposed to doing the work, because doing local law work was hundreds of thousands of dollars for our building. So for them, until they got really pushed and I, you know, reached out to local officials and they kind of put pressure on them, that would have been up. So it's kind of strange to me that, you know, you get fined or you know, you know, you need to do some kind of exterior facade work, but then there's no follow-up as to how long it can stay up. And I just think that the city agencies, if it's kind of the wild, wild west out there, and they can do that and just keep up a bridge and scaffolding for an indefinite amount of time, and, you know, just kind of have it be this horrible, horrible eyesore on your block. I don't understand how that's allowed to happen. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Great, thank you for your input. Pamela.
Yeah.
Well, hello again. This is nitpicking, but could we settle on the proper, somebody can help me out with this, maybe Viren, on the semantics. My understanding has always been that the sidewalk sheds that are installed are basically sheds, and that's what we have our issues with, and that scaffolding is actually what gets mounted on top of those sheds when facade restoration work is being done. Very often the sheds stand there with nothing on top of them for years. Okay. And then when a contractor finally gets hired, then scaffolding goes on top of the shed. But I see in this conversation, those terms seem to be interchangeable.
Well, I think we are using them interchangeably, but since we're transportation planning and we're concerned with the impacts on the sidewalks, we're going to stick with sheds.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you. So in Sarah's proposal to her presentation, the biggest word on the screen was scaffolding. So that's why I'm asking.
Okay.
Otherwise, I love the presentation. Thank you, Sarah. That
Thank you for the
amazing.
Brian.
Hi, hi all. It's Brian Weber, public member on CB4 Land Use and Zoning, and I'm the co-chair of the 36th Street Block Association. Thank you for this presentation, Sarah. It's great. And thank you, board, for your comments. And I hope this is something that you will continue to pursue. Just several comments. Dale brought up walking past construction sites with unmasked workers on smoke breaks in the West 30s. Because of all the temporary shelters, it's worse. We walk past unmasked shelter residents, smoking, lots of drug activity. And what has happened now is that residents on 36th Street and workers on 36th Street, rather than trying to navigate the sidewalks, now walk down the center of the street. It's just safer, rather go into traffic than try to go under the scaffolding. So that is definitely an issue. On on our block currently, we have something like 5 different scaffoldings. I spoke with 2 different building owners today about this topic. One says theirs is going to be up for some time. The other is in a very similar situation to the previous speaker. They completed the obligations of local law 11, I think over a month and a half ago. Their engineer signed off on it, and they've been trying unsuccessfully. And I know they've been reaching out to Carl Wilson for assistance, and I know he's been helping them on this, but they have not been able to get DOB to sign off. They're desperate to get the scaffolding down, and they just can't. The other thing that I think hasn't been touched upon is that not only is the facade of the building that's being worked on or inspected requires a sidewalk shed, but I cannot remember if it's 15 to 25 feet that it has to overlap the neighboring buildings.
25, yes.
25 feet, yeah. So there are some neighboring buildings that have had scaffolding in front of them because their neighbor hasn't removed their shed or hasn't done the work on their shed. So I'm wondering if that is something that could be perhaps addressed, because if we're talking about expanding the time frame for inspections, then why should we have the adjoining buildings be scaffolded as well? And then the other point, there's so many great points you guys brought up, is the cost of keeping up a sidewalk shed versus the cost of doing the repairs. And I believe several panelists and several speakers have already brought this point up, that often it is far less expensive to keep up a sidewalk shed, pay fines for not having it removed in a timely fashion, than doing the facade work. And I don't know if penalizing the building owners is the solution. Maybe it's coming up with some tax incentives to get them to actually do the work, so they can get the sheds down in a timely fashion, because some privately owned buildings cannot incur the cost. It's a challenge.
I think that's an interesting point, Brian, because I was also thinking about that. Like, if there are more sticks than carrots on that, like how effective is it going to be? Like, yeah. So I think I think you raise an interesting point, like some kind of financing, some kind of financing incentive program might make sense.
Something that's not necessarily punitive, but something that helps building owners, because a lot of these buildings are, co-ops or residential co-ops. They're not greedy landlords per se. And then, Viren was discussing the design and how the AIA came up with that competition, and Christine alluded to it as well. There's a new scaffolding typology, which is the sort of white vertical posts that are very well illuminated. And the other interesting thing about those is that they don't have the same horizontal cross braces at waist height. So what they enable pedestrians to do is gain access to the street and not be entrapped or enclosed in the scaffolding. And maybe
they're much more pedestrian friendly.
Right.
They're also, I think there's a limited quantity, just like there's just so much of that scaffolding or shed available. And also I think it is a little more expensive for a builder, for a building owner.
Yeah, my understanding is it is more of like a kind of premium product for owners who are more concerned about the aesthetic. There's one on 23rd.
It's definitely more expensive and less accessible, but perhaps that could be something that gets mandated for new construction. And perhaps one looks towards phasing out the other type of scaffolding, or at least taking the principles from that new sort of scaffolding, which makes it more pedestrian accessible. And so you're not sort of trapped in these corridors,
or just demanding it for high pedestrian traffic volume areas.
Yeah. And so I applaud you guys for your work, and if there's an ad hoc committee, I think members of the public would love to participate in it, because this is plaguing our neighborhood and others around the city. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Susan. Susan, did you have a comment on the scaffolding?
I did. I'm sorry, I was on mute. I want to applaud Sarah on her presentation. This has been a huge topic in our area. If we just walk down 21st Street between 8th and 9th, I think 80% of that block is scaffold, and it has PS 11 on it. And I cry for all of the residents on that street. It is a pure quality of life issue. Just to piggyback on the new design, which is phenomenal, is to possibly give incentive to scaffolding companies to invest in this new scaffolding, because the scaffolding that these companies have, they've already amortized that cost and they're getting pure profit on the scaffolding at this point. So it would be interesting to see if we can incentivize the scaffolding companies to reinvest in that, because it will allow more sidewalk accessibility. I myself had scaffolding for the building next door, and the company in about 15 minutes, because no, maybe a couple hours, because something fell from the building, they literally put poles right at our front door. And so I had to become very involved in the design on the street. So yes, the design in the street can be done much more thoughtfully with the scaffolding companies, but the guys that put it up really don't really care about where they're putting it. They just put it out on the street. And to the point about businesses, I had a business for 18 years on 32nd Street, a restaurant, and I will tell you that when that scaffolding went up, thank goodness we were a designation establishment, but we did lose about 20% of our business. And that went on for 5 years, and we had to put it into our planning to allot for that. So this is a great cause, and I hope that you guys continue and work at this. It's really wonderful.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for that comment on the impact on your business. That's it's great to quantify it in that way.
Yeah.
All right. Brett, did you want to circle back on this, and Colin, or did you have was your hand up from previously?
I did. I just wanted to try to get this as something that's actionable for us. So, I mean, this is what I would suggest based on a lot of what people have been saying, what I've been hearing. So, I mean, I think there are 4 specific things I think we could follow up, and we can decide if some of these are more administrative, or if there's a letter we want to produce, or maybe just create a record for ourselves. So I think first, from the city side, I think it would be good for us to, I think it's the borough president's office might be the first stop to do a study to simulate or maybe do a survey of the cost of local 11 compliance versus the cost of construction and maintenance of the sheds and the scaffolding. And a study like that could help them make a recommendation to perhaps adjust local law to align it with compliance costs, the alignment of the compliance costs to the landlords with the against the cost of maintaining and building these sheds. So I think that would be the first thing. I think, and that's probably a borough president's study. The second thing I would recommend is for Department of Buildings, urge them to do a study of local laws, the local laws 5-year timeframe against current construction technology. So it's probably time to either validate or update that timeframe. So as Christine was saying, maybe 5 years was just a number that they compromised on in the 1970s. Perhaps there's room to extend that based on current technology. The third thing is also a DOB thing that I think we'd recommend DOB to create design standards with pedestrian clearance and ADA compliance as priorities. And we're saying this because these are things that we can get our local electeds to urge the city to do. The fourth thing I think would just be good data for us to have. I think maybe if someone were to reach out to REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York, to see, just to let them know that we're looking at this. We think this is something we can get our local electeds' attention on. See if they have any kind of studies that show an economic impact on property owners from the DOB delays. Because that kind of information, I think, is going to help rally the private sector to help urge some of these changes by the city. So I think those are 4 things I would suggest we recommend with who I think we should reach out to.
Great, thanks, Brett. Colin, did you also have your hand up? Or was that from before?
No, it was from before.
Okay, so
Dale, another thought is,
it's 8 o'clock.
Should we invite DOB and have them explain their vision, their perspective on that, on this whole thing? We can prepare a bunch of questions and then have them come and at least explain what it should be, and and whether.
I mean, I think it would be great to like say, on the basis of an assessment of our district undertaken by our committee, we found that there are the following, like a lot of long-term scaffolding. Building owners and residents have seen, delays and et cetera, and like outline it and say, can you please address these questions, whether they do it in a response, an email response, or whether they come in person.
Sarah.
Hey, Dale, can I add an observation real quick?
Sure.
I keep on raising my hand and it's not getting noticed, but anyway.
So sorry.
We don't see it.
Okay. One comment I want to make, and it's just purely an observation. I noticed, at least in Chelsea, there were a lot of sheds added right about the time they started opening up dining. And it appears like some of the landlords specifically added the sheds to accommodate the restaurants out front of them so they could take more space walking. But I just wanted to make that note. That's all.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry.
Janine, we need to figure why Rob is not showing up in the.
Well, I think he was showing up as a phone.
Oh, here he is. Now he is here.
But now he's showing up and his hand is raised. Okay.
Right.
I'm sorry about that, Rob. You weren't appearing under your name in the chat, in the participants list. Now you are.
All good.
Okay.
Now
that's interesting that there's some bootleg scaffolding out there to accommodate outdoor dining.
What about asking Sarah to tell us what she thought would be a good next step?
What was your interactions with the DOB like? Like, where do you think we should go with it?
So I haven't engaged with DOB yet. I love Brett's action orientation, first of all. Thanks, Brett. I, at minimum, would love to get written responses. I was thinking more like asking for a conversation would be kind of one of my proposed next steps, because, I think the truth is going to lie somewhere in the middle, right? There's definitely a resourcing issue on their side. They're definitely kind of part of the bottleneck. I think there's also issues on kind of the property owner sides, and the truth will lie somewhere in the spectrum in between. And I'd love to get their perspective on some of the ideas even we've thrown out here about, how feasible is it for them to do design changes, and, some of the other things we've been discussing. I do believe the Borough President's office is like engaged and cares about this issue. So, I was even thinking of reaching out to her office just to see what, if any, work they've already done. And I love kind of the study or survey idea. That could be powerful. But would think about maybe a conversation I or any other folks who are interested could have. I don't know if it's more appropriate to have that offline, Christine, and kind of report back to the committee, or if we'd want to ask them to come speak to us. I'm not sure what the typical
we can ask Jesse his advice, and Janine and Jesse to advise us on that, I think what would be good is to create, if this is one of the next step, and I think Brett has a lot of good next step, maybe to create, everybody could put in their questions that they would like to ask the DOB and send them to Sarah.
Yeah,
that-
I've started a list of my own, so I'm
Yeah,
happy
I
to
know, and
compile
we need to.
a
And
full
we can,
list.
and we can capture the community feedback we've gotten specifically from people who have had like very specific interactions with.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So do we have are we wrapping this up in a resolution, or are we just taking next steps?
I think we should take next steps and just, do a little more of all the things we talked about. Maybe Sarah can summarize that, send around, and then we can see whether other people can help.
Great.
Committee, and then we go to the next step, which is gaining a little more understanding of.
Brett, did you wind up putting your outline in text that you can share with Sarah and Christine and I? Or
I did take notes, Brett, but if you have
okay.
them handy, happy to
Yeah, I
incorporate
think we
any
need
other
to
ideas you might have.
re-listen to the audio of the.
Okay,
meeting,
that's
that
true. We have the recording.
We have a lot.
Okay.
There were a lot of good ideas there that we should.
All right. Well, thank you for initiating this whole conversation. Oh, I see Brett is.
Brett has put his stuff, right?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
You don't think I just make this up off the top of my head as I'm speaking to you?
I have a suspicion that you're
the wonders of Zoom technology. You can look smarter than I am.
What is in the chat is being saved somewhere, or it goes away.
We don't save what goes on in the chat, but if you need me to copy and like hold it for somewhere, I can.
That would be
make
copy and paste it. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
We can copy and paste. Okay. Okay.
Janine,
Thank you, everyone.
Janine, as a host, you should be able to save it if you want. If you go to the three dots at the bottom of the chat.
Okay.
Right side bottom.
Oh yeah, I think you can export it to a text.
No, you can just save it as chat.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great, Janine, if you don't mind, because I'm having when I copy paste, it's not showing up properly.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes it's funky. Okay. Thank you all for that discussion. It was super. It was illuminating. The third item on the agenda is sidewalk maintenance, and we wanted to postpone until next month the bulk of this discussion, because we're putting together something a little more contextual and comprehensive about it. But with the prospect of snow accumulation on the ground, there have been a couple of concerns raised about the current situation that we're facing right now, which is that there are lots of vacant retail storefronts and the possibility of a snow accumulation, which could spell trouble for sidewalk clearing in the district. So I wanted to just raise this as a topic of discussion and see if we, if there's a resolution around this. I think we did something somewhat similar around city bike maintenance, city rack maintenance, and maybe.
No, I think we did that about the sidewalk between. We did.
Oh yeah, and we also did one about sidewalk maintenance in general, but this is specifically to snow removal.
Right.
And when there's nobody accountable for snow removal on sidewalks.
Well, I think it's another one of those examples where there is a whole apparatus with the city of removing the snow in the street for cars, right? But not for sidewalks. And then the corners are not being cleared, and you cannot call them for 76 hours. And it's another one of those examples where the whole expenses of the city are really focused on what Viren calls the black top, and nothing is for the sidewalk. And especially, I'm sure you have seen some bus stops covered in snow where nobody can get from the bus stop to the bus. And I think that's another aspect of the discussion we had on the sidewalk, which says, well, it's not just the DOT, but it's sanitation as well. Sanitation is spending millions to clear the snow from the road, but nothing is being spent for the pedestrian and the sidewalks. And you know, at a point of
So
time.
it's under the larger umbrella of pedestrian
Right.
equity, but like,
Yeah.
you know, we may need to raise a red flag about the potential for this problem with pedestrian passages being blocked because of unmaintained sidewalks with snow.
And the ADA groups are very strong about asking the city to clear the ice and to clear the sidewalk and the corners, because obviously not only it's difficult for all of us, but if you are in a wheelchair or if you are blind, you know, this is even worse. How do you function? And meanwhile, the whole city is spending all the money to clear the blacktop. So I think that's part of the discussion we want to starting to focus on, you know, what do we want to ask the city to do about those things? But I just wanted to mention that.
Right. So would you say that we need to write a letter or?
No, I think we need to keep all of that in mind when we get to writing a letter. Just, you know, in my mind, it was DOT, but then you look at that and you say, oh, it's also sanitation. So it's not just one agency.
Okay.
Hey, so it's Colleen from DOT. So last month, sanitation gave an excellent presentation about jurisdiction on this at Gale.
Borough President?
Borough President, yes. District Cabinet meeting. And I can't recall the name of the gentleman, but he gave a really great presentation on this. And just so you know, I mean, just because a lot is vacant, there is a property owner who is responsible for that, for the clearing of snow in front of their establishment.
Sure.
If there is an adjacent property owner where there is a pedestrian ramp, they are still responsible for clearing that area of snow. And I know with the bus shelters, if there is a shelter, JC Deco, you know, they will send someone out there to clean the shelters. I think what's happened in the past, and there was miscommunication, is that the shelters would be clean and then sanitation would come with their snow plows and they would, you know, put the snow in the shelter. So that's been a miscommunication where we've cleared that up. In areas where there is no bus shelter, of course, sanitation will clear that location. So, I mean, I would love for you to get a copy of that presentation. Maybe you can reach out to her office. But it was really a well put together presentation.
Okay, we'll ask for that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to the last agenda item before old and new business, which is the 10th Avenue corridor with proposed Link NYC sites. So as I, you know, so Christine, do you want to lead this discussion?
No, I think, well, I'll try to summarize where we are. As you all know, in 2015, there was a new contract negotiated with DOITT. And as a community, we were very aggressive in trying to reduce the number of installation we had, especially on 8th and 9th Avenue. And we worked with Manhattan Borough President to create a memorandum of understanding, which became the law essentially, which allows us to request from the borough president that we can remove a link at one location, provided that we find a replacement location. And that was part of the protocol that was approved. So some time ago on 8th Avenue, there were a number of issues with a number of Link kiosks related to sidewalk sheds and crime, etc. And the community came to community board and say we want to remove them. When we went to we sent a letter, and then the the borough president's office came back and say, well, you know, we need replacement locations, right? So what we did is, in order to do that, we went back to the document which had been approved by the full board of CB4 for all potential locations that could be a trade-off and could be a replacement. And we selected 4 from that on 10th Avenue. And we selected those because 2 reasons. One was that, you know, the operator doesn't want to swap a kiosk from a location which has a lot of traffic and where they can make more money from advertisement to a location which has no traffic and they cannot make any money. So in order to do a swap which was reasonable and acceptable, 10th Avenue sounded, with the galleries, etc., sounded like a reasonable place. And those locations had been approved. And the second reason is that when we put together the whole plan, the benefit to the community for the links was that it would create a network of high-speed Wi-Fi in the streets. And the condition on that was that the links had to be spaced by, you know, no more than 200 feet. So if you're not spacing the links into that distance, then you wouldn't have a network anymore and you wouldn't have the Wi-Fi. So in order to create a link at the time, a network at the time, we selected those locations so that they could create a network and they could deliver value to the community. So all that went on, and then Block Association, I think 400 Block Association and 10th Avenue became aware that those locations had been proposed and raised major quality of life concern. And what we want to do is hear today what the concerns are and go from there. Oh God, I can't hear anything. You are on mute there.
Oh, so sorry. Okay, great. Christine, thank you. That was a really good summary of, you know, the process to which we got to today. All right, is there any comment or question from the board members?
Well, I think the attendees wanted to make a presentation or talk.
Oh, is there a presentation?
I don't know.
Well, it was the images that they sent me.
Okay, all right. So.
So are there any, well, we'll go to.
Well, Carrie Henrichsen wanted to speak on it. She's on right now.
Okay, great.
Hey guys.
Hello.
It's been a fun 2 hours. All right, so I think that Janine has some photos, and this presentation is nothing like Sarah's presentation. But I'm Carrie Henrichsen. I own a music school on 10th Avenue between 22nd and 23rd on the west side. So one of these kiosks would be directly in front of my business, which serves the local community, families, and children.
Carrie, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to clarify something. Mm-hmm. When we gave our location, it didn't say where it was going to be on the block. So nobody knows where he would be on the block, right?
On the location.
Just clarification.
On the location that I received, it said 20 feet from the northwest corner, which is directly in front of my business.
Well, what it said is that it shouldn't be less than 20 feet from the corner.
Okay, so I mean, what I want to present here is what the current circumstance is on my block. So we have to remember that this is post-COVID. So currently, well, originally it's me and 2 restaurants. I'm speaking for the restaurants as well. There's Tiapol and there's Juban. The salon next to us is closed. Tiapol just closed. Juban will probably close, right? So I'm the last remaining open business on that block. We have built a structure out front that we've all shared as a community. we have construction in front of us as well. So currently we have crime, we have no garbage pickup. This week alone, I had a man break into and move into my basement. I have cleaned up human fecal matter, drugs. God, I mean, every day I go in and it's something else. Juban was literally just robbed 20 minutes ago. So this is already what we're dealing with. And the idea that you are relocating one problem on 8th Avenue to come throw us under the bus when we are already in the situation we're in, like a kiosk would literally have to be within our business's structures. I don't know how the city plans to accommodate for that now that like outdoor dining and outdoor business is on the sidewalks. But I have photos that I sent Janine. And these are all just like from like the last like 8 days.
So Carrie, you know, clearly when we did those suggestions, right, which were just suggestions, in 2015, it was a very different world than where we are today.
Absolutely.
And today, knowing what we know of those links, you know, they were sold to us as this is a new technology, great, blah, 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 right? Since then, we have gone through tremendous amount of disruption with those installations. And if we knew today what we knew then, what we know today, we probably wouldn't do the same recommendation. So there is no question about that. And then after COVID, it's even a different level of anxiety and difference.
Right.
So the good and bad news is that there is a lawsuit or a disagreement between the city and the installer of this of links, and they are in renegotiating of the contract. So this is not going anywhere for a very long time. I think it's not going to go anywhere for, you know, I would think 1 year or 2 years or whatever. And so I, you know, at the time when, and then Brian from the BP office said that they are now checking whether the MOU we had negotiated is going to be included in the new contract. Because if we don't have an MOU, we don't even have the option of removing the station, okay? So once we know whether we have an MOU, and they have not found that yet, then we'll be in a position to say, okay, the swaps are feasible, we have a contract, and then at this point, there should be a discussion of what do we do on 8th Avenue. And I could go back to Pam and the people of 8th Avenue and say, okay, how is the situation now? Is it changed? Do we still need to relocate them? Right? And then we can resume that discussion at the time, I think. And we really want to help you, and you know, everything is very stressful, but a lot of things have changed and a lot of things are still going to change. So we should follow up and find out. And that we are committed to do that.
Thank you, Christine. That's really helpful. So then I guess that my question, that actually is a huge stress relief, because this on top of everything was like, it was not going to happen. But so how do I receive communication about this?
Well,
like how does anyone in the community receive it? Because I only received this communication like through someone who was connected with Susan, I think.
Well, now you're on the map and we have that issue on the map. So we're going to keep an eye on it. The borough president's office is aware of the issue, so they have an eye on it, right? And if anything starts moving, we will notify you and tell you this is happening or not.
The kiosks are specifically our purview as transportation planning because they're located on sidewalks.
Right.
But with your structure, I mean, I think that's more the purview of what's the committee? I'm blanking on the name that handles the
BLP.
Yeah, BLP.
Well,
I don't know, what is the structure?
Our structure is actually on the sidewalk because the construction whenever we got the license to build it, the construction was actually taking up the street in front of the sidewalk. So we now have a permanent structure on the sidewalk.
What is the use of the structure?
The Teapole uses it as a restaurant after 6 p.m. It's my waiting area for the school before 6 p.m.
I see.
I see. So it's restaurant seating, but it's also doing double duty.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have to practice with my door open and we have a low capacity. So we move our business onto the sidewalk.
But then that restaurant is closed, right?
She just closed and will hopefully be back in April.
Okay.
Hibernated.
Well, thank you for, I'm sorry about, I mean, you know, we've seen these situations all over the district. I'm sorry for what you experienced on your block specifically and with your business. I'm going to move on to Inga.
Hi, good evening, everyone. We are also very concerned, and when this went through CCBA to formulate a letter to move the links from 8th Avenue somewhere else, 10th Avenue was suggested. I strongly objected, as did other people, and our voices were not heard at the time. London Terrace has had to hire private security guards because of the crime on 10th Avenue and 9th Avenue, actually. A woman was, a month or two ago, robbed in the liquor store, an elderly woman. Someone came in. We have a lot of homeless people over here on the west side. We have less police coverage than 8th Avenue because they're focused on 8th Avenue. It's closer to the precinct. We've asked for police. We have not gotten any police over here. So the business owners, the galleries, the diners, the Chase Bank on 10th Avenue, we've had to hire people. We have a lot. We have obviously London Terrace is undergoing repointing, which will be going on for at least 2.5 more years, we're told. So the entire block is covered by sidewalk shed. We have people that move in, they live in the gardens, they live under the sidewalk shed. We have a lot of drug use. We have a lot of homeless people. We have no police over here. I don't know if Kimmy is on from Don Giovanni. She spoke to me today. She's on 10th Avenue. I think she's right across from Teapole, or the next block over on the other side of 10th Avenue. I don't know if she could stay on this long, but she was very concerned about the links problem and what it would bring to 10th Avenue because we have less police or no police versus 8th Avenue where they're focused on 7th and 8th Avenue. So I think bringing the problem from one avenue to another is not good, and it will probably be worse because we don't have the police to take care of the additional problems that we're going to get if we get all these links on 10th Avenue.
We hear you, Inge.
Yeah. So I think it would be, I think the problems on 8th Avenue are, recognizable, but at least they have a lot of the 10th precinct focused on those two avenues, 7th and 8th. We have nothing on 10th Avenue. So I think bringing more homeless, which come with the links, would be much worse on 10th Avenue than it is on 8th Avenue. That's
Thanks,
and
Inge.
that's what we, and like I said, the sidewalk sheds are going to stay up for at least 2.5 years because
again, Inge, I don't think anything is going to happen with those links for a very long time.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Okay. That is, and like I said, Kimmy from Don Giovanni, they're struggling. We don't need more homeless in front of all these few restaurants that are still left.
No, we want to keep them all on 36th Street.
Yeah. We're in a humanitarian crisis, but by all means. Okay. So
we
Susan.
are trying to save the few diners and restaurants that we have in the area.
Right.
So,
We're all responsible for the humanitarian crisis that is homelessness right now. So Susan.
Bad. Thank you.
Agreed.
Susan.
Here I am, sorry. Well, thank you, Christine, for speaking more in depth on this selection that had happened from 8th Avenue to 10th Avenue. I appreciate that. But I want to speak to it a little bit. So I did look at the 115 relocation sites, and I do think that they were done in 2014, 2015, and the landscape of Chelsea, especially on the west side, and I'm sure Jeffrey can attest to this also, that it has changed drastically with all of the development that has happened. And I think that we need to continually relook at things that have happened or suggested and update them. So when the link stations were proposed on 8th Avenue to be dismantled, to look at the suggestions, it would have been, and I think we really have to start to bridge our conversations between the block associations, MCB4 and CCBA, to really check and make sure what we're doing is that we've checked. And this did not happen here. And I understand that you would choose a place that had traffic, but what I will say to that is, it isn't the same traffic as 8th Avenue to choose. I would have chosen, and I actually did, Christine, you suggested I look and make suggestions of where those 4 link stations might go other than 10th Avenue. And I did look on 11th Avenue, and I did look on the river where Chelsea Piers is along there. And I have to say that if we were to look at density, that would be a place to choose, because those are the places where people need to plug in. They could be biking, they could be walking, they could be running, they could be whatever they're doing. But the people that are out all day long would probably need more of a reason to plug in than they would on 10th Avenue. And also, I think Wi-Fi there would be terrific because, again, people are sitting in the park, they're doing work, and now with COVID and all the social distancing, we need to have more of that in our open spaces for the public. So again, I would have chosen other sites, and I'm more than happy to tell you which ones I did choose on 11. I think I chose a couple on 12th Avenue. So here, my biggest complaint here is that, you know, we weren't advised of this, of choosing these 4 places, and how I really question, how can we become more of a bridge together to collaborate with CB4? I do think it's imperative that if the city's renegotiating with City Bridge, that isn't it to our advantage to advocate change to that original contract, i.e. whether the locations of the defunct telephone booths are viable for the link kiosks. I mean, if you go back and Google, you will find so many complaints about the link stations, and you'll find so many complaints. I don't know if anybody's lived in the city in the 60s. I grew up here since the 1958, and I will tell you that public phone booths were just as much of a disaster, unless they were inside buildings, etc. People lived in them, people peed in them, people defecated, people did all that. Whatever's happening at the link stations were happening in phone booths.
Susan, I don't know, I just want to clarify something. I'm not sure I was clear, but the renegotiation does not include the listing that I gave, that you have seen, right? The renegotiation includes installing what they were supposed to install in the first place. And the MOU allows for removal of some links, provided they are replaced in another location, as a generic statement, not as a list.
I see what, so when I went on the site.
Can I just jump in, Susan, because I am very interested in your suggestion about the link locations along the river. I think we might face an obstacle because of the land ownership, right, Christine? Is that the?
No, I mean, the major obstacle is that if the contractor, I mean, the links contractors say, at that location, I cannot make as much money on advertisement. Therefore, I reject that location. So that location.
But that location would have a lot of transient visitors, assuming we're out of the pandemic.
Yeah, but I mean,
right.
That's the perception. I mean, that's the critical item is that the location has to be as productive from a revenue standpoint as the one that you are replacing. And it is very subjective. Right? It's subjective because they are going to go and sell the advertisement to some through an agency, and the people are going to say it's on 12th Avenue, and people are going to say forget it. There is nobody walking there.
Well, it's in Hudson River. It's in Hudson River Park.
No, I know, but we don't have to be convinced ourselves. What we need is the people who are buying advertising needs to be convinced, and it's
so that's the obstacle as you see it.
Right.
Okay. That's very helpful to understand. I do think that can be overcome, but I do recognize that it's a real obstacle in the real world of how these things are getting deployed.
Can I just ask though, when I looked at
Susan, yes.
Yeah, when I looked at the 115 relocation sites, which you told me to look at, Christine, there were green dots on 11th and on 12th. And actually, we could go all the way up to 57th, which I didn't look at because, of course, so I'm assuming that any of those green dots are approved by any land ownership. And also there are some that are by all of the ships where they come in that are available. I mean, there are some really great places today.
That list was a list that we we did to say, look, these are over the years, all the locations that could be eligible. And that's what it is.
Okay, so at this point, I really would love if we could look at this and readdress it with both agencies of DOITT. And I would like to see something in writing that we can, relook at those 4 sites that we have proposed on 10th and maybe come up with another place, a reversal of it, because we didn't have an opportunity as a community to really discuss it. And I guarantee you, we would look at it as really a group of people that are not just shoving a problem from one avenue to the other. 10th Avenue, if you are reminded, is we have a numerous amount of schools. We have the church right there. We have a park. We have everything that 8th Avenue has. And I just feel like this is just a dump without really thinking about, let's put this in a really great place. And I'll sell it to any advertiser for you, Christine.
Well, you don't have to do it for me, Susan, you don't have to do it for me. I'm not the person to do those things.
I believe that is within your skill set.
Right.
Totally is.
All right, if you don't mind, I'm going to move on to Lisa.
Okay, can I say one other thing? Bill Borick is not able to be on the call. I don't think he's on today. He, unfortunately, he's in the hospital in Florida. He had a fall. He's okay, but he is there. And he wanted me to say that that the relocation recommendation is unacceptable, as there needs to be the community's input. I'll say the survey of 2014 needs to be revised, as the landscape of Chelsea has had a huge change. And he says that the decision should be rescinded. And I think I got that all right, but I guess he could talk later on, but he did want me to say that.
Okay, thank you for conveying that.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Lisa Edmondson. I live at 360 West 22nd, London Townhouse, the building with the Rite Aid on the corner. And I've had an interesting year in that I went from being just a regular resident to, because of the loss of one of our board members to COVID, to taking his place on our board. So it's caused me to become more more engaged in issues in a different way. So I'm particularly, I would just want to express sympathy and understanding for particularly Carrie and your business and the challenges of today in trying to manage in these unprecedented times. We've only lived in Chelsea for 4.5 years. I volunteer extensively in the immigrant and the refugee communities, as well as with the homeless on the Lower East Side. So I have great sympathy for the challenges that people who are trying to live and survive on the streets of New York are, but I also understand and appreciate the concerns of particularly families with young children, seniors who don't feel safe on the streets, and anyone with a disability who is trying to navigate going in and around sidewalks. So my particular reason for getting involved in this, it was interestingly enough, was because I happened to notice pink spray painting on the ground of one of the old phone booths, which is the corner of 22nd and 9th. And there was a guy who for many months had been spending long periods of time watching movies at that site, presumably doing drug deals, but never actually seen. And then suddenly I saw the spray paint and thought, oh no, what's happening? Because I was aware of what had been raised concerning moving the Links kiosk west. So I agree. I don't know if it was Susan or somebody else who said that moving a problem 2 blocks west doesn't actually change anything except the location of the problem. We don't know what's going to happen with that phone booth, which is right outside by it's right by a drop-off zone for UPS and for Amazon. People do their praying right beside there if they're stopping on their lunch breaks, and it's also a place that people move in and out. But it feels really personal to say that it's going to affect our building, that we should just move a problem somewhere else. But I'm just really gratified to hear how thoughtful you all are approaching this. And the question I had was, what's going to happen? And I understand now that what's going to happen is going to be pushed down the line as a result of lawsuits. I just wanted to express my concern on behalf of the board and the residents of 360 West 22nd about anything that increases the level of discomfort and danger anywhere in our neighborhood, not only on our own corner. A guy told me about being chased walking his dog last week. It's not feeling safe, and it's not feeling safe anywhere in the city. But unfortunately, the kiosks that were initially designed for one purpose are being used for other purposes. And I just hope you all will take that really seriously. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Lisa, I just also want to clarify something. All the existing phone booths are going to become links. And that's not something that we have control over. So the only thing we have some very small control over is when there are no phone booths and whether they can put a new phone booth there.
So may I ask, as just for clarification, they are going to become links because it is revenue that the city has made a commitment to and a contract that they have no way of getting out of, or they're going to become links because we can't fight City Hall?
No, they are going to become links because there was a contract signed, and that contract required of this vendor of the links vendor that they convert all the existing booths.
And what was the time? What's the length of the contract? And
this is for 20 years or something like that. And
so someone made a really bad decision.
And they were supposed to be done to do a conversion of about 3,000 or 4,000 a year. And what happened is that the contractor didn't hold his bargain, so they were not converting as fast, and that's why there was some lawsuit, and the city threatened to, kick them out. But whatever the negotiation is going to be, the outcome of that is that each of the old phone booths are going to become links. That's something that we are not involved anymore in, and it's a given.
So forgive my ignorance, but I understand. I mean, I worked in advertising for a long time. I understand there's one thing, which is the visual of being able to see advertising when you're driving up and down a street. The two other aspects are the Wi-Fi connection and the plug-in recharging station aspect. So is all of that guaranteed by the contract?
Yes.
And
Although
so until you said it was 2014. So until 2034. These will be a presence in everywhere in New York, and there's no negotiation.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
shocking. It's shocking and disappointing. But
the context, and these are all the discussion we had in 2015, and I was fighting tooth and nails to reduce the number we had in our neighborhood. I was really fighting for that, and people will tell you I worked on that from 2008 to 2014 to try to get that MOU, that Memorandum of Understanding, to make sure that we had some small flexibility, very small flexibility. We asked for 76 installations to be removed. We got 13.
Well, I guess the only thing we can hope for is that, like many businesses that are going to be struggling in the years ahead, that will be one of them, and that perhaps things will shift, because certainly people's use of Wi-Fi, use of technology, the fact that everyone can carry around a tiny battery nowadays if they want to. Nobody needs a docking station or a charging station on the West Side nowadays,
except the homeless,
and even they don't need. That's a preferred mechanism, but that's I don't mean to get into I don't mean to get into
what
judgment.
I'm saying is that people visiting, people which don't have, I don't mean the homeless specifically, I mean people which do not have a home base in a sense. So
I think part of the rollout was anticipated use by what was something like 55 million overseas tourists in New York City as well.
Yes.
It just didn't.
So everything has changed. We don't know what is going to come out. We need to wait until see what comes out. And then really, we heard you and say, this suggestion on 10th Avenue are not appropriate. And what are the options?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm, as a city biker, I'm very conscious of the access stations that many tourists use to get access. I would imagine, if anything, that there'd be potential for Lyft and its City Bike network to provide multiple use purposes.
But the problem was that the city had a stream of revenue with a phone booth. And they wanted to replace that stream of revenue. So when we suggested that they should put them in the bus stops, where it would be very useful, or as you say, in City Bike, all those things are separate revenue stream, and they didn't want to merge those revenue stream. And so we were not successful at that time. And the borough president was very excited about this technology,
Yeah. It's. I've only been here under 5 years, so I'm learning every day. And I again would like to express my appreciation for the opportunity, and also to echo what others have said, which is that I completely stumbled upon this meeting through a connection with one person who connected me to another person and connected me to another person. And the more visibility you can have around these issues, so that people can at least understand and know in a firsthand way, not just by seeing some post on social media, what is going on, and also what the actual possibilities are versus what has been decided, over which we have absolutely no control. Because I think our greatest frustrations as human beings today are thinking that we can change things we can't, and just living in a world of uncertainty. So thank you again.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to move on to Anatoly.
Of course. Okay.
Anatoly?
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you for having me on. I represent 7 galleries on 10th Avenue between West 20th and West 21st. Like many of the attendees this evening, I was brought into the loop, frankly, thanks to Susan, actually. And it was totally happenstance. And, it did feel like oh, I haven't heard about this. This is obviously something that, deeply affects our community. I echo in, quite strongly, in fact, much of the horror tales that Carrie brought forth to us this evening. So, that all aside, I think we've covered that quite extensively. But, a lot of the conversations that are happening now around the sort of contract and, it's signed and there's nothing we can do. But, as far as I understood, the contract has already been breached. The marketing revenue that we keep fighting over and, using to weigh our decision hasn't actually been paid to the city. So I wonder to myself, is there nothing in the face of that we can use to kind of reassess, frankly, the viability of this program altogether, right? As Christine, I think, very accurately said, the world has changed. Everyone has data access in their pocket. Even actually as a foreign tourist, I go overseas, at least before COVID, sometimes on a monthly basis, and I can go pretty much anywhere on the planet now and still have my same data plan, right? It's gotten so much easier. And, as an experiment, I think it was incredibly revolutionary and, futuristic and quite exciting, understandably, the benefit that this could bring the city. But as we've seen along, as everybody said, 8th Avenue, et cetera, and with the world changed as it is now with COVID, it just doesn't seem, frankly, reasonable to continue anymore in the same course of action.
Mm-mm.
Thank you for your comments. I believe that's everyone. Inga, did you want to jump in again, or was that your hand up from before?
I just had one more thing that I wanted to ask. I thought at one time, maybe 2 years ago when we were talking about this problem with the links on 8th Avenue, that you could get the charging portion disconnected from them, even if you continue to keep the links, so they still get their advertising, but you can have the charging portion turned off so that.
I think we did request at some point to disable the charging stations.
Did anything ever come of that? Because that would deter people from setting up their couches and chairs and living around the links because they're plugged in.
I don't know whether that function specifically can be turned off, because we have requested it, but I've seen it back at 8th Avenue and 41st Street.
Okay.
And so we will ask the question.
Okay. There has to be a way to do that. They're just not doing it. I just didn't know if we had ever gotten anywhere. I remember that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Okay. Because that might solve part of the solution on 8th Avenue. I don't know.
We did request that on 8th Avenue in Chelsea.
Yeah, that was in our letter about those 8th Avenue locations.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I think we've heard from everybody who.
Joanne is still. Oh no, that's it. Okay.
No, that was a prior hand. Okay. So we're not taking any actions necessarily on this because we have to await or do we want to capture the problems with these locations?
Oh, Dale, I think Rob has his hand up.
Oh, Rob, go ahead.
Hey, no. This was for new business. I have an observation I just wanted to bring up with everyone, but go ahead with what you're saying, Dale.
Oh, okay. I'll call on you when we get to new business. Okay.
Well, Dale, I think we could send a very short letter saying, considering all the changes since 2015, etc. The locations on 10th Avenue should be removed from consideration at this time. Yes. until we have a new discussions in the context of a new contract. Yeah,
and we can point to recent changes related to the pandemic and persistent problems with the locations in the past, so that we can draw a distinction, but also amplify the message that there's lots of problems with these locations. So yeah, is that a letter to do it?
It's a letter to Gail, I think.
Gail.
Because Gail is the one who has the official position to DOITT. So we can copy it to DOITT, but that would be to Gail.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the letter as outlined to Gail Brewer's office with a CC to do it?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, thank you all to our neighbors in Chelsea for speaking on this topic. Now it's time for old and new business, and I think Rob had a new business item.
I'm not sure if it qualifies underneath our purview, but I want to point out an observation that I made. Early on when COVID was new, different agencies made different rulings based upon the information we had at that time. And one in particular was the MTA, as far as it goes with the booth workers. At that time, they thought that transmission was through people handling things, touching things, which is true, but not quite to the extent. Now they know that the virus is more aerosol, and that's how it's mostly from person to person. And even now today, if you're at the you go to the MTA booth, they don't handle MTA cards, they don't handle cash. If you don't have money that works in the machine, you're SOL, or if you have an issue, they're looking to cut money, and these people do nothing but just like put people through that emergency exit right there. And that's really about it. My point being, I think it really needs to be reevaluated. We have got banks, we have got cashiers out there in grocery stores, as well as other industries that they're all handling cash and cards, and they have not seen an uptick in those industries of COVID. So why is the MTA still refusing at this time to address this and move forward? So, you know, as a person who uses MTA, it expands their service without compromising their employees. That's about it, if anyone wants to add to it.
Where is that? I'm not sure I understand.
Sure, so the MTA workers that are in the subway stations, in the booths, have like some COVID related practices in which they're not handling money, for instance. So you can't,
or MTA cards.
Or cards. So you can't go, like if the machine is giving you a problem, or if you can't go to the booth and say, can you refill my card for me? Or if, you know, so they'll say, I can't.
Can you break a $20 bill?
Right, anything like that. Or they just, their functionality as MTA employees is limited by this COVID restriction. And I think Rob is addressing, like, should we address a letter to the MTA to say, like, are you re-examining these COVID restrictions on your booth employees?
Exactly what I'm saying, Dale.
I'm fine. We can send a letter.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Colleen. You know, I didn't get a chance to say this, but I had an opportunity to look at 234 West 21st Street, where we're proposing the neighborhood loading zone. And that's actually, it's a shared bike lane on 21st Street. And what you have, you know, with the neighborhood loading zone, that space will be the space where cars are parking right now. So when we install the neighborhood loading zone, cars would not be able to park there unless if you're loading and unloading. You won't be able to park there all day. So this is not going to interfere with the bike lane or pose a safety issue on 21st Street, just so you know.
As we suspected. Thank you, Colin.
But you're welcome. I wanted to clarify that. I wanted you to go to bed and sleep, Dale, and not have to think about that.
Thank God. So should we write a letter to the MTA? Does any other committee members have thoughts on this?
Motion to write that letter.
Motion for Rob to write that letter, to draft that letter and send it to us.
Sure, I'll draft a letter and forward one to you.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Oh, I can't do that. Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the letter to the MTA asking them, they're re-examining their COVID practices for booth workers? Any opposed?
Okay.
Any booth workers abstaining, not eligible? Okay, Do we have any more?
I'm abstaining. Just I gotta think it over.
Okay.
I want to inform the committee that for over a year, I have been sending emails to our good friend Colleen regarding completing the protected bike lane on 52nd Street on the south side, just west of 9th Avenue. There was a DDC construction storage site there while the bike lane was installed. Then a building went under construction and they put a huge dumpster in the way. And so then, of course, the paint didn't get extended to 9th Avenue. And so, of course, you know, there was no longer a bike lane. And I am just delighted that that dumpster is gone. DOT extended that bike lane to 9th Avenue, and now cars are parking where they're supposed to. Yay. So I'm thrilled about that. We now have a river-to-river connection on 52nd Street.
Wow.
So
yay.
All right.
Great. Thank you for the update.
It's
Jeffrey.
9 o'clock.
Do we have any more new business? Martin?
You are on mute, Martin.
I moved to
Yes.
Happy New Year, everyone. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Happy holidays.
Bye, everyone.